All right, everyone, welcome back into another NBA DFS video. Going to be breaking down this 4-game slate on Thursday. Let's go ahead and get into it. So let's start off here with the first game, which is going to be Miami versus Detroit. Now, there are some injuries that we are kind of concerned with in this game, but ultimately it is somewhat of a straightforward game here as well. So the two injury spots that we're somewhat worried about here are in regards to Detroit. Really just Tobias Harris being out is kind of the biggest difference maker, because right now with those two projected to be out, we are seeing Isaiah Stewart's going to get a minutes bump, and then Jaden Ivey is projected to get a minutes bump as well. And so that does really matter. We do look at the game total, pretty high scoring game, about 240 total points and a 5-point spread. So this is a somewhat appealing game. On top of that, guys, for Miami, Fontecchio is currently questionable. If he ends up sitting, we see a slight minutes bump to some players like Ware and Drew Smith, but nothing too much there. And so when we look at the top plays here for Detroit, guys, Cade Cunningham is actually popping up as one of the better values on this slate in general. 5.2 value rating, projected for about 33 points. I actually think this ends up being a pretty good spot. Now, a little bit of that is predicated on him getting a double-double. He's projected to get 10.5 assists. Obviously, if he gets 9, that's going to hurt us a little bit, not getting that double-double bonus, especially at that price tag. But he ends up being a pretty darn appealing play. Then we also have Isaiah Stewart, who is somewhat priced up a decent amount here now, but 5K still somewhat in play to me. And then Jaden Ivey, 4.2. I do think we could be looking at him as a potential value play for us on the slate. We don't want to go crazy with it, but I do think he's a viable option on a 4-game slate. And so I will go ahead and put Cade Cunningham in there. And then for Detroit, again, we could get to a little bit of Isaiah Stewart. I'm going to put Jaden Ivey in there for now. With the multiple position eligibility, I do end up liking that a little bit. We're not expecting anything crazy. This would ultimately be a spot where we'd want to upgrade. But for now, I think that's okay. And then let's go ahead and take a peek at Miami. So value-wise, we're not going to get any great values, guys. Khalil Ware would end up being a decent play. Norman Powell's fine as well. Powell's a little bit point dependent. He's someone that can get hot shooting the basketball. We have him projected for about 24 points. He could end up getting more than that, and it won't be too surprising. I'm okay with just getting to any of the Miami Heat plays, just not necessarily needing to go out of my way to play them. They're all shoulder shrug plays to me. Shrug your shoulders and move on with it if you end up on them in your builds. And so from there, we'll jump into Philly versus Dallas, guys. And looking at their projected starting lineups for Philly, Embiid is still listed as day-to-day. If he ends up sitting, that could create some value, and that honestly would make the game a little bit more appealing. For Dallas, we are having some interesting minutes here. Brandon Williams projected for 24 minutes, but Ryan Nembhard projected for about 28 minutes. I think there's a decision to be made between those two ultimately. And then we also are looking at Philly, guys. Nothing too crazy here with the minutes bumps. Maybe Embiid's a little bit more in play, though, if he does end up still seeing that little bit of a minutes bump. And so let's start off with Dallas. Brandon Williams is currently one of the better values on the slate at 4.4. Now, I think he is more appealing than Jaden Ivey, who's a little bit cheaper. And if you weren't playing him, I don't mind the idea of getting to Ryan Nembhard, but Nembhard, we do need him to get, more minutes than Brandon Williams. I think there could end up being a pivot there between those two plays. From there, I will say PJ Washington is probably a little bit too cheap as well. Anthony Davis, I think, is properly priced, but I do like trying to get to him as well. Now, the part that I don't like about Brandon Williams is it very much is predicated, him being a good play is predicated on him getting those minutes. And we just don't know for sure whether or not those are going to end up being there. And another tough part about him is he's only point guard eligible. So playing him does eat up another guard spot. Again, I do like him, but I could see the path where we're getting to Ryan Nembhard, who's a little bit more expensive, but maybe he ends up getting the 30 plus minutes here. Again, he is projected for more minutes, and if that ends up being true, then we're getting, I think, a little bit of a decent edge there. And then, yes, PJ Washington, just as a call, I do like him as a play. He's just a little bit too cheap. He has been streaky, don't get me wrong. But assuming that this game stays close, I do think he has a good chance to end up having a good game here. And let's go ahead and take a peek at Philly, guys. For Philly, nothing too crazy. Again, I do think we can get to Embiid. If he's going to play 31 minutes, he has a decent chance, I think, to end up getting a double-double. Don't hate him, but that's really it for some of the plays that we were looking at here for Philly. If you need a min-price play, Jabari Walker, projected for 16 minutes, could get you about 14 DFS points. Not something I would typically call out on a bigger slate, but again, with this being a 4-game slate, worth somewhat calling out. So jumping into the Kings versus Boston here, guys. Both teams had the same players listed out that have been out. This is almost, it was a 10.5 point spread. Now it's a 9.5 point spread. So come down a little bit, which is interesting, but still a low game total. I don't think we're going to try to get to many plays here. I'm just going to go ahead and see what the data is telling us are the best plays here, because I think we're going to get much better plays in the later night game. So yeah, we take a peek at Boston, guys. As always, you can get to maybe one a Brown, Pritchard, or White and kind of hope that they end up hitting. I don't hate that idea. I think that's fine. We do have Kada as a decent play as well at 5.2. Again, just probably a little bit too cheap, but nothing too much there. And again, that kind of furthers why we're probably not looking at too many plays here. And then for the Kings as well, guys, just sorting it by value. You can see it's really pretty ugly there, especially with the fact that this game could end up being a potential blowout. Maybe some of these other younger guys get some more minutes, and that really uglies the situation for us. So with that, guys, I do want to jump on into Utah. Utah is also in a pretty interesting spot here where they have a lot of players listed out. And on top of that, you have Keontae George and Lauri Markkanen also questionable. This is a 12-point spread as well, but decently high-scoring game. And so all the best plays that we're going to get here on the slate value-wise are on Utah, but also that is kind of what creates some difficulty on the slate. So just kind of naturally looking at guys, Collier and Sensabaugh are two of the better values on the slate just in general. The issue that I have is I don't think they're guaranteed to be able to be great values. Like I think ultimately if the game ends up staying close, we're looking at Lauri Markkanen and Keontae George end up being spectacular plays for us on the slate. And like they might even be a little bit too cheap. Again, if the game ends up staying close. Their per 36 production, guys, those two with, let's just put Kevin Love, Ace Bailey, and Yusuf Nurk off the court. Keontae George averages 44.2 fantasy points per 36, and Lauri Markkanen averages 43.3 fantasy points per 36. Very appealing plays there. And so if we're trying to plug some of those plays into our builds, I think we want to. Again, I think we're going to be paying up for George. Lauri Markkanen does not draw the best matchup, but kind of a well. But here's kind of another issue that we have is, do we like Collier more than Brandon Williams? I think it's about the same. I'd say Brandon Williams has a little bit more of a ceiling, but if we get news that Keontae George is out, we're looking at Collier for sure. And then also Walter Clayton Jr. becomes a pretty darn interesting play as well. We see over the past two games, he's gotten 22 minutes. And if he's going to get that again, I also think that's extremely appealing. And so that's where I'm like, all right, I do really like Jaden Ivey as a value, but let's try to get to some of this Utah value instead. Maybe we get to Walter Clayton in the shooting guard spot. And then maybe we get to Collier. I wish we had another guard spot we could get to because I want to play Keontae George. But if we're not playing Keontae George, I will get to Lauri Markkanen. Filipkowski, I feel like he's a little bit too high priced. He does have a ceiling to go off. He is projected for 30-plus minutes. Could really go off, don't get me wrong. Per 36 wise, he does crush it as well, guys. Per 36, averages about 38 fantasy points per 36. And he's someone that should get right around 30 or 33 minutes. I do think he's a fine play. I like chasing the upside with him. And then for the Clippers, we're really not getting much. For the Clippers, I think everyone's pretty much properly priced, although Kawhi Leonard has been going off, priced at 9.6, and he draws a pretty great matchup. And so I kind of just want to ride the hot hand with him if possible. But one thing I don't like about playing him and Cade Cunningham together is we're basically saying we're not going to play James Harden. And James Harden has been pretty darn consistent as well, although I do think he's a little bit priced up. But this is a good matchup. I do expect him to go out and have a good game as well. And so with that, guys, let's try to close out the build. So center wise, we have about 4.9 left over. I'm probably going to get to Filipkowski there, but I think we could go Stewart. I think that's a decent punt play. If Embiid were to end up saying like Bona would be an interesting click, but for now, we'll just put in Kyle there. And then forward wise, we have 4.1 left over. This to me is kind of like a punt spot here as a whole. I don't necessarily like anyone. I might go to Taylor Hendricks, who should get 20-ish minutes here in this game. And if he does, he could end up being a decent play. So, okay build, I would say, for a 4-game slate. We're not getting any like great sub 4K values, which is kind of a concern. So with that, guys, let's go and see what the 9-to-5 lineup builder is telling us are some of the top builds here tonight. And so I'm just going to run 20 lineups here, guys. Nothing too crazy. Just seeing what are the top builds that we're getting. And so, guys, we go ahead and see what the top lineups are currently. Davion Mitchell in the point guard spot. Powell, I like Powell. Sensabaugh, they are trying to punt. The day is trying to punt to Jabari Walker. Kind of get it. 4-game slate. I get it. Trying to force in some top plays. Then we get Embiid, Harden, Flag, and then Brook Lopez. I kind of like the second build a little bit better. But again, I kind of like Cade Cunningham here more so. And I'm kind of interested that we're not getting to him as much as maybe what I was expecting. Cade Cunningham is in this lineup. Cade, Flag, Brandon Williams, Bam, Andrew, Wiggins, Sensabaugh, Simons, Davion Mitchell. So it is seemingly into more Davion Mitchell than I would like. Davion Mitchell is probably too cheap, is a safe play. I would rather try to get to Brandon Williams, maybe Nembhard, maybe even Collier or Walter Clayton if Keontae George ends up staying. So kind of interesting what the day is pulling in versus kind of my thoughts here. I don't hate the builds. I think they're logical builds. I kind of like mine more as it sits right now, but mine's obviously got more risk to it as well. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. Appreciate you being here. Make sure to leave a like on your way out. Subscribe to the channel as well. you guys would like access to the NFL or NBA DFS lineup optimizer or the NBA DFS cheat sheet, head over to 9to5sports.com. Get access to those tools for a low monthly cost of $10 a month. Appreciate you guys. Good luck. And as always, let's keep cashing.